Good morning and welcome to Our Stories. Our guest today is Trish Spinner, and Trish and I have been talking, and she's going to share with us some about her growing up and working years, and particularly the impact of whether girls were and women were given equal opportunity, the same as boys and men. So. You told me you grew up in Pena, and in your early years you played with a number of kids in the neighborhood. And that you guys basically, if the weather cooperated, you were outside. I mean, there was, just that kind of fun time of life. What kind of games did you play, and when it came to team selection, where were you in the selecting order?
Yeah, I was pretty much a tomboy all my life and loved being outdoors, and our neighborhood was really active, and we just were outside all the time.
Yeah.
My mom used to joke, the only way I knew the kitchen was because the room I had to walk through to get to the rest of the house, so I was not an inside kid.
Okay.
But we did play a lot of ball, a lot of kickball, a little basketball, just tag, whatever it was. But at school in particular, at recess, and I met my best childhood friend in first grade, and she and I shared a lot of interests. And so we always wanted to go play with the boys at recess, and play whatever they were playing. And usually when we picked teams, or they picked teams, we were among the first chosen on the teams, ahead of most of the boys.
Yeah. So the picking was more by quality of play rather than gender preference.
Yeah. Well, it's our enthusiasm, and we were decent. We could hold our own with the boys.
Good. You played on girls' interscholastic sports teams in high school after Title IX passed, and you indicated that the implementation of Title IX in your school had some very strong support.
It did. I was very fortunate at my junior year in high school. We started interscholastic sports. And the impetus of that after Title IX passed was the superintendent of our school district wanted to start girls' sports programs in the high schools. And the high school principal was also on board with that. Yeah. And we had a teacher at the time that they approached, and she took it on. In fact, she coached every sport we played. We played field hockey and tennis, volleyball. We had badminton, bowling, and track and field. So she took it all on, and she did that for many years.
She coached all of them.
Yes, she did.
Wow. The support that you experienced there in Pena, I have to say, as a retired school administrator, that I found that really interesting, because that was not usual. There was a lot of resistance on the part of coaches, administrators. They were concerned about money that was going to be taken from boys' sports for girls' sports, facilities that they were going to have to share, all those kinds of things. And in many districts they made it difficult for that to actually come about.
Yeah, and it could have all been going on a little bit in the background. From my perspective, I didn't notice that or catch on to that. But when I look back at it too, I mean, the community was really behind us as well. We had a lot of community support, good attendance at whatever games we did participate in. We also had some high school classmates that were hired by the local newspaper, and they covered all our sports, and we had a lot of articles and photos in the local newspaper on a regular basis. So it seemed it was really a positive experience. I was very fortunate.
That's great. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't just that there needed to be team opportunities and so forth, but there were a lot of things that had to be dealt with in terms of locker rooms, uniforms, coaches, referees, facilities, all of those kinds of things that, and the sharing of that that became a kind of a big thing in terms of, schools working that out, and people being hired to take care of all those kinds of things,
True.
So it wasn't just, the girls and the team. There was a whole structure around that Title IX impacted.
Yeah, we did have a uniform for the sports that required a uniform, and that uniform was worn regardless of the sport or the season.
I bet the boys didn't do that.
Not that I recall. But you're right,
Yeah.
the athletic director, there were just a lot of impacts.
Yeah. So the role of women was undergoing a lot of changes here, and part of what was being looked at really came out of the civil rights law in terms of, opportunities, for women, and the things in the workplace that in discrimination towards women and those kinds of things. Is there anything that you witnessed along, in your life and early work career and so forth, where you felt like, gee, maybe the guys are getting a better shake on this thing than I am?
I think my experience was I hired in at Illinois Power right out of college. It was a positive experience. My co-workers were very supportive, but I was among the first women in my department. But I did, the things that I think stick out to me were usually I was the only woman in a meeting. If otherwise, maybe there were a couple of us there, but
Sure.
we had some rules in the office. Men were allowed to smoke at their desk. Women were not allowed to smoke at their desks. Fortunately, that didn't impact me, but those who did smoke, they were giving 2 breaks, one 15-minute break in the morning and one 15-minute break in the afternoon to smoke somewhere. I don't know where they went.
Yeah.
The other thing I remember that stuck with me was we had nameplates on our desk and like an acrylic holder.
Right.
And, obviously the name on one side, and on the back side of the nameplate, there was a saying of some sort, but it was essentially, if a man doesn't care, a man can accomplish anything if he doesn't care who gets the credit. And I did edit mine with a marker to say woman and she on the back of it. And that was that way for a long time until we got new nameplates.
I can say at this time too that as this sort of thing was happening and being looked at in many workplaces around the country, it was being focused on in education too, because there was a study that led to some very intense training for teachers that showed that teachers tended to call on boys more than girls, call on white students more than students of color. And so they went through a lot of training to try to help teachers, sort of self-correct those behaviors. And there was some resistance because people had a hard time accepting some of those things in terms of that was truly what was going on in classrooms. But it also showed that not only were boys being called on more than girls, but the bright girls were being called on least among kind of all the groups of students in the classroom. So it was something that we had to work into our workplace. So when you got hired for Illinois Power, they put you through some training to get you ready for your job.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Some of my initial responsibilities were handling certain complaints that were filed by customers against the company. with the state agency that regulated us. And we had all kind of offices out in the field because our territory covered about 80% of the state. So they sent me to various offices around the state to meet people and to kind of understand what the operations were, service area and out in the field. And one of the first places I was sent, and I hadn't been with the company for very long, was to the Metro East area around St. Louis, and specifically our East St. Louis office. I learned that it was a office where the cashier area was the only office in our territory that had bulletproof glass. And they had shorter hours than any of our other offices. They opened later in the morning and closed earlier in the afternoon. And one of the days I spent, I rode with a gentleman in a truck to disconnect people's gas service for non-payment. And the morning I met him, normally I would wear a dress or a skirt and heels to work. But that morning I wore a pair of nice slacks and top and very low heeled shoes. And I could tell he was I would say a veteran, experienced employee. And when I met him, he looked me up and down and he looked at my feet and he said, "Can you run in those?" And I quickly,
Your shoes.
My shoes.
Yeah.
And I quickly responded, with or without them. But fortunately, I can say that there were no instances where I needed to put that to the test.
But he had you ready in case.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he
Yeah.
did. He got my full attention.
So back here in Decatur, you were married and you had a family with 2 children, and you were all interested in playing golf.
Yes.
Okay, and so you became members of the Southside Country Club. But after you joined, you discovered that membership was not exactly what you thought.
That's true. We joined with some other couples at the same time, and we learned that women were not allowed to, we had some restrictions on when we could golf. And on the weekends, we were not allowed to tee off before 10 a.m., and we were not allowed to golf at all on Thursdays. And we did put that to the test on occasion. But I had one friend that we were ready to go on a Saturday morning, and there were no men waiting to tee off and no men that had a tee time before 10 that hadn't shown up yet.
Yeah.
And it was maybe, let's say, 9:45, and we asked the head pro, if it was okay if we went ahead and started. And he looked around and he said, "Sure, take off." So we started off on number 1, and we hadn't gone very far, and there was a male member who was already golfing on the course, and he saw us, and he looked at his watch and knew that we were out there before 10.
Oh boy.
He made a beeline for the pro shop and raised quite a ruckus with the pro and wanted us to come off the course.
Wow.
But the pro held his ground, thankfully, and we were allowed to continue to play.
Yeah. Oh. So you were the rabble-rousers on the golf course.
We didn't think it was that big of a deal, but apparently some thought more of it than we did.
Well, it's great that you were in school at that time and college and so forth in terms of Title IX and the things that came your way, and that the impact through the workplace as things developed. You were invited back to Pana for the 50th anniversary of the initiation of Title IX.
Yes, that was about 2 years ago, and it was over Labor Day weekend. It was a lot of fun to reconnect with older classmates, and one of the things they did was they invited us to the football game on Friday night, and they had a special program at halftime to recognize 50 years of women in athletics. And one of the visuals, I think, that really got my attention and stuck with me was they introduced us by class. So the group of girls that was ahead of me in school, they were the first group.
Right.
And there weren't a lot of us that showed up for that Friday night game, but those of us who did, there might have been, maybe half a dozen or so from the first class.
Mm-hmm.
And about the same number for our class, if not a little bit more. And then as they introduced the classes and the girls got younger and younger that were there, the greater a number that showed up and that were on the field. And just the visual of that for me, looking, it made quite an impact, and I realized what a legacy that we were able to be a part of, to get that program started and to be able to participate.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful.
Well, that would have been pretty impressive, I'm sure, to see that kind of growth over time, and the involvement of women in athletics and in your own community where you could see that,
And it just happened to coincide, but that weekend they had the inaugural ceremony for the Pana Sports Hall of Fame. And there were some women who were recognized and inducted into that very first class. Yeah. One of the women that was a year ahead of me was inducted. Our coach, our longtime coach, was inducted. And then, fortunately, my last year, my best childhood friend and tennis partner throughout the years, she was inducted as well. So it's nice that they're recognizing the women as well.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that. It was really interesting. And,
I appreciate the opportunity, Dick.
It's good to
I appreciate your efforts. Thank
Okay.
you.